Before there was war, before mighty empires rose, before humanity created laws, courts, or prisons, there was already a crime, the very first murder in all of human history. And the killer was not a distant enemy. It was a brother who killed his own brother, Cain, Abel. Two names that might seem tied only to the worn-out pages of the Bible. But behind them lies a story that has haunted humanity for thousands of years. The elder brother, Cain, worked the soil as a farmer. The younger, Abel, tended the flocks. They were the first children born outside the Garden of Eden. They grew up together, worked side by side, and watched their parents struggle with life after being cast out of paradise. They seemed like a new hope for humanity. And yet, from that very bond of brotherhood came the first bloody tragedy. Why? Why did Cain raise his hand against his own brother? Were they not the first innocent children born after Adam and Eve were driven from the garden? Were they not supposed to build a new beginning for mankind together? Many people believe it was all because of jealousy. Cain envied Abel because his own offering was rejected, while the gift of his younger brother was accepted by God. But was it really that simple? What truly drove Cain to act? Or was there some deeper secret hidden in this story? In this journey, we will follow each detail written in the Bible, uncover layers of meaning, spiritual, philosophical, and human, and perhaps you will realize that the story of Cain and Abel is not only about the past. It is about us, about you, about me, about the darkness that still whispers inside the human heart. Eden was gone. The gate that once opened into paradise had closed forever. On that edge, Adam and Eve looked back one last time at the beautiful garden, the rivers of clear water, the trees heavy with fruit, the place where they once walked in the nearness of their Creator. But now it was only a memory. Ahead of them lay a completely different world, dry soil, scorching winds, the untamed wilderness of nature. From that moment on, their lives were changed forever. Adam had to bend his back to the earth, trading sweat for food. Eve carried the pain of childbirth, bound to the responsibility of sustaining the future of humanity. There was no paradise to shelter them anymore, only trials, hardship, and fear. And yet, in that darkness, a spark of hope was born. Eve became pregnant and gave birth to her first son. She named him Cain. In Hebrew, Cain means to acquire, to obtain. As she gave him that name, Eve exclaimed, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." Cain was not just a child, he was proof that God had not completely abandoned them. A new hope, a new beginning, was entrusted to the very first son of mankind. After Cain, Eve gave birth to another son, Abel. The name Abel means breath, fragility. In contrast to Cain, a name that rang with strength, ambition, and determination, Abel sounded like a sigh, a fleeting breeze. Even in their names, the brothers carried two different shades, one tied to possession and assertion, the other to frailty and transience. Time passed. Cain and Abel grew up in the household of Adam and Eve, the parents who had tasted the consequences of disobedience. Adam most likely taught them how to till the ground, scatter seed, build shelters, and kindle fire. Eve may have told them about Eden, about the perfection that had been lost. The two brothers were raised in a world marked both by the memory of paradise and the harshness of reality. When the time came to choose their paths, Cain, the elder, bound himself to the earth. He became a farmer, his face darkened by the sun, his hands hardened by calluses, his sweat soaking into the stubborn ground. The work was heavy, full of struggle, but Cain found pride in it. He could produce food with the strength of his own body. Abel was different. He chose to be a shepherd. His image was one of gentle steps following the flock, eyes soft, ears tuned to the wind and the stream. His work seemed lighter, yet it was bound to fragility, nurturing, guarding, and sustaining life. And so, two parallel paths were formed, Cain tied to the soil, to labor, to possession and sweat. Abel tied to the flock, to nature, to gentleness and purity. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a difference in professions. But beneath the surface, it was a symbolic opposition. Cain material, Abel spiritual. Cain strength, Abel fragility. Cain, the hunger to possess, Abel purity. Out of this contrast, the foundation of conflict was laid. What is striking is that, even though Adam and Eve had been expelled, God still remained present in their lives. They could still bring offerings to seek His acceptance. And that very desire to be accepted, what should have been sacred and noble, became the seed of tragedy. Imagine Cain and Abel sitting by the fire at night, listening to their parents recall the days in Eden, a place without tears, without hunger, where they once lived close to God. But Cain and Abel would never see that paradise with their own eyes. They knew it only through stories, through their parents' memories. To them, Eden was something both sacred and unreachable, a promise not yet fulfilled. And perhaps it was this that planted in both of them a burning desire to be acknowledged by God, to prove that they, the new generation, could be forgiven, could be accepted. Then came the day when Cain and Abel both prepared offerings for the Lord. One offering came from the sweat-soaked fields of Cain. The other came from the tender flock of Abel. It seemed like this would be a holy moment, a bridge connecting humanity with the Creator. But no one could have imagined that this very moment would become the beginning of a tragedy humanity would never forget. The offerings. Time passed. Cain and Abel grew into men, each tied to his own work. Cain bent over the stubborn soil every day, plowing, planting, sweating to feed his family. Abel continued to lead his sheep across the fields, searching for green pastures and streams of fresh water. Each day, both of them felt they were building a new world, a new life. But deep within, they carried one longing: to be seen by God. Though Eden was lost and Adam and Eve had been cast out, God had not vanished from human life. Humanity could still turn toward Him, could still bring offerings as an act of worship, as a way to seek the acceptance and love of the Creator. And then, one day, Cain and Abel brought their offerings to the Lord. Cain, the farmer, chose from the crops, the fruits, the grains he had grown and placed them before God. Perhaps he picked what he thought was his best, the result of calloused hands, of long days under the burning sun, of nights when sweat soaked the fields. Cain did not bring something picked up by chance. He offered his effort, his harvest, his labor itself. Abel, the shepherd, also prepared his offering. He chose the firstborn lambs, the strongest and fattest of his flock. For Abel, it was not just wealthy with sacrifice. A young lamb could breed, could sustain the flock. But Abel gave it to God as if he were giving away the most precious part of himself. In that moment, two brothers, two offerings, both turning toward the Creator, seemed like a beautiful picture, a sacred scene. But then the story turned. The Bible says, "The Lord accepted Abel's offering, but He did not accept Cain's. One was received, the other was rejected." And there the seed of tragedy began to sprout. Why? Why did God accept Abel's gift and not Cain's? Was God showing favoritism? Did He prefer sheep to crops? Or was there a deeper lesson hidden here? Many scholars suggest that the difference was not in the objects, but in the heart. Cain brought fruits of the ground, but Scripture does not say they were the first or the best. They may have been just a portion Cain took from his harvest. Abel, on the other hand, offered the firstborn lambs and their fat, the most valuable, the first, the best he had. Abel gave with reverence, with trust, with faith that God deserved nothing less than the very best. But was that the only reason? Or was there more beneath the surface? Some explain it this way. Abel offered blood, the life of a living creature, sign of sacrifice, of atonement, of death, making way for life. Cain offered crop symbols of his own labor, but without sacrifice. One pointed to trust in grace. The other leaned on human effort. And here the question rises: Does God not look at the gift, but at the heart? At that moment, Cain stood silent. He saw his brother's offering accepted, while his own was left aside. Inside Cain, emotions must have surged: disappointment, shame, anger, and then jealousy. Put yourself in Cain's place. You worked hard, you chose your crops, you believed you had done right. And then God, the one whose acceptance you longed for, turned his face from you and smiled at someone else. That pain cuts deep. It is not only the rejection of an offering, it feels like the rejection of your very self. In a way, every one of us has been Cain, watching others receive recognition and praise while our own effort is ignored. Seeing siblings, friends, co-workers celebrated while we are overlooked. Jealousy was not only Cain's emotion long ago. It is the emotion of humanity across time. And that was the turning point. Cain, the firstborn of humankind, could not accept rejection. The seed of jealousy took root, grew stronger, and was preparing to lead to a crime never seen before. But before it happened, listen carefully. In the Bible, as soon as Cain became angry, God spoke to him. Why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. This was not only a warning to Cain, it is a warning to all of us. Jealousy may burn quietly in the heart, but if it is not controlled, it can become a fire that consumes everything. Cain heard, but he did not listen. He saw, but he did not perceive. And so, the seed of jealousy kept growing, ready to erupt into a terrible tragedy. Jealousy ignites. Cain stood in silence. Before his eyes, the smoke of Abel's offering rose upward, as if heaven itself had embraced it. But his own, nothing, no light, no sign. Only a heavy silence, a silence that felt like rejection. Cain looked at Abel. His younger brother bowed his head, his face filled with peace. Not because Abel demanded it, but because he believed God deserved the first and the best. Abel did not boast, did not flaunt, but that very peace became an invisible blade, cutting deep into Cain's heart. Cain clenched his fists. He remembered the days under the scorching sun, bent low over the soil. He remembered every seed, every drop of sweat that fell into the ground. Was all that effort worth nothing? The silence of God toward him, did it mean the denial of his entire being? Jealousy. It began like a thin wisp of smoke passing through Cain's heart. Jealousy. It grew as Cain's eyes caught the calm smile of Abel. Jealousy. It turned into fire, burning away pride, cracking the bond of brotherhood. Cain turned away. He no longer wanted to see Abel. He did not want to look at that acceptance, that image that made him feel like a failure. In Cain's mind, every story his parents told about Eden, every memory of loss, seemed to weigh him down. Cain felt abandoned once again, not only by his parents, but by God himself. Perhaps what hurt Cain most was not that his brother was accepted, but that he was rejected, overlooked, dismissed. Jealousy. It turned rejection into a wound. Jealousy. It made the wound bleed bitterness. Jealousy. It twisted bitterness into hatred. And from then on, Cain no longer saw Abel as his brother, his own flesh and blood. Abel became an adversary. Abel became the shadow that cast Cain aside. God saw what was rising in Cain's heart, and he said to him, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." The warning rang out, but Cain did not hear. He could not hear, because when jealousy blinds reason, every word of caution is nothing more than wind passing by. Picture Cain that night. He lay down, but sleep would not come. In his mind replayed the image of Abel, the way he offered, the look of peace in his eyes, the acceptance from God. All of it like a knife cutting again and again. He tossed. He clenched his hands. He felt the fire inside burn hotter. Jealousy. It whispered in Cain's ear, "Why let Abel stand above you?" Jealousy. It screamed in his heart, "You deserve the recognition." Jealousy. It urged him, "If Abel were gone, you would no longer be compared." And so a dark thought began to stir in Cain, the thought of removing his own brother, a thought no human had ever conceived before. The thought of the first crime. Perhaps at first it was only a fleeting thought, but it returned day after day like a seed planted in dry soil. And then that seed sprouted, grew, and sank its roots deep. Cain began to look at Abel differently, no longer with a brother's eyes, but with eyes poisoned by envy. Every step Abel took, every smile, every glance became thorns in Cain's sight. Jealousy. It was not just a passing feeling. It was a fire burning from within. Jealousy. It blinded him. Jealousy. It turned brothers into enemies. And when jealousy rules the heart, the line between love and hate becomes so thin it can shatter in an instant. God had warned, sin is crouching at your door. But Cain did not shut the door. He let it in. He gave it his heart. And from that moment on, tragedy was no longer a possibility. It was inevitable. The fateful moment. That day, the sun rose, as it always did. The first rays spilled across the fields Cain had plowed, across the meadows where Abel led his sheep to graze. On the surface, nothing seemed different, but inside Cain, a storm was raging. A storm of jealousy, bitterness, and resentment. Cain walked toward Abel. His voice was calm, as if nothing had happened. "Brother, come out to the field with me. I have something to tell you." Abel looked up without suspicion. Since childhood, Abel had trusted his older brother. He followed him with the same gentleness he always carried. The two brothers, one leading, one following, left the shelter of their tent, left the sight of their parents, and stepped out into the wide open field. The field, a place that seemed ordinary, now became the stage for the first human crime. Cain walked beside his brother, but inside him were venomous whispers. Jealousy, hatred, bitterness, twisting like serpents inside his heart. With every step, they tightened their grip. With every breath, they urged him forward. Cain looked at Abel, at his gentle smile, at his clear eyes, at the peace that Cain could never find. And in that moment, every warning from God, every bond of brotherhood, every childhood memory was drowned out by a single flame: jealousy. Cain's hand trembled, not with hesitation, but with a fire too strong to contain. His fists clenched. Blood rushed to his face. His heart pounded. And then the moment came. Cain lunged at Abel. A short cry rang out, carried away by the wind. Abel was caught off guard, unable to resist. The gentle brother was thrown to the ground. Cain pressed upon him, his eyes burning. And then he struck. Cain killed his brother. Human history recorded its first crime. Not a warrior killing an enemy. Not a stranger stealing another's life, but a brother killing his own brother. The Bible does not describe Abel's death in detail. Only a single sentence: Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. But that brevity makes it echo even louder. For sometimes a crime needs no many words. A single act is enough to alter the course of humanity. Cain sat silent in the field. Before him lay Abel's lifeless body. His brother's blood seeped into the earth. The earth, the very ground Cain had tilled. The soil that had once fed his family. Now it received not only Cain's sweat, but his brother's blood. In that heavy silence, it was as if creation itself trembled. The wind through the grass sounded like mourning. The cries of the sheep rose up as if they knew their shepherd was gone. And Cain, his heart was empty. The fire of jealousy had turned to ashes, but those ashes brought no relief. They left only a bottomless pit in his soul. Stop and imagine. This was the first time in human history that human blood touched the ground. The first time death came not from nature, not from age or accident, but from human hands. from brother against brother. That moment, the story of Cain and Abel was no longer only a family tragedy. It became a mirror reflecting the darkness inside humanity. A reminder that even at the very beginning of human existence, the seed of evil was already there. Abel's blood cried out from the earth. It was not only the death of one man, it was the cry of justice, of truth, of righteousness trampled underfoot. And from that moment, God came. He raised his voice and asked Cain, "Where is your brother?" A short question, but one that weighed like 1,000 pounds. But a question for every generation to come. The climax and the message. The question of God, "Where is your brother?" On the field, stained with blood, Cain stood silent. The earth had swallowed Abel's final breath. No one witnessed it. No human eye saw. Cain forgot one thing. Nothing can be hidden from the Creator. And then the voice of God came solemn, grave, piercing into Cain's soul. "Where is your brother?" A short question, a direct question. Yet its weight was enough to shake the course of history. God did not ask, "What have you done?" God did not ask, "Why did you kill your brother?" He asked, "Where is your brother?" It was not only a question for Cain, it was a question for all of humanity. A question of responsibility, a question of human compassion. Cain bowed his head. His heart trembled. But instead of confessing, he tried to escape. Cain answered, "I am not my brother's keeper." A cold answer, a denial, a washing of hands from his own flesh and blood. The tragedy was the denial of responsibility. Cain did not only kill Abel, Cain rejected Abel. And from that moment, humanity learned a dreadful truth. We are not only capable of doing wrong, we are capable of denying our responsibility to one another. The cry from the ground, "Abel's blood," does not remain silent. But God was not silent. He said to Cain, "The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." This is a haunting image. Blood does not fall and disappear. It has a voice. It cries out for justice. It demands truth be revealed. The earth, created to sustain human life, now became the witness of crime. It drank Abel's blood, and that blood became a cry that reached the heavens. This shows us every action leaves a trace. You may hide from parents, from friends, even from a community. But you cannot hide from God. And you cannot hide from your conscience, the inner voice that will cry out like Abel's blood, reminding you of what you have done. The punishment of Cain, the curse of exile. God declared, "You are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood." From now on, when you work the soil, it will no longer yield crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. This was not just a personal curse. It was a sentence for the first crime. Cain lost his deepest connection to life itself, soil. The earth had once fed him, returned to him harvest from his labor. But from that moment on, the earth became his enemy. It rejected him, just as he had rejected his brother. Cain's punishment was not death. It was to live in isolation. No homeland, no peace, no land to call his own. Cain became a wanderer forever. And here we see a paradox. The greatest crime was not punished by death, but by life, to live with torment, to live without escape from one's conscience. Cain's protest: "This punishment is too much." Cain cried out, "This punishment is more than I can bear. Anyone who finds me will kill me." Here we see something bitterly ironic. Cain feared for his own life, while he had stolen his brother's life without trembling. He dreaded being killed, yet he did not tremble when he killed. So it is with humanity. When we wound others, we often treat it as normal. But when we, ourselves, are hurt, we cry out that it is unfair. And here, God responded strangely. He placed a mark on Cain so that no one would kill him. Cain was to live, but live in loneliness, live as an outcast, live forever with a cry of Abel's blood echoing in his mind. The message: where did the first crime come from? Many think humanity's first sin was eating the forbidden fruit. But no, eating the fruit was disobedience. The first real crime was Cain killing Abel, and from this, mankind learned a painful truth. The enemy is not only out there. The enemy may be within a family. The enemy may be one's own brother. But deeper still, the real enemy lies within the human heart. Jealousy. Jealousy may sound small, but it can turn love into hate. Jealousy begins with a glance, a comparison, a wound in the heart. Jealousy, not restrained, flares up like fire and consumes everything. The first crime of humanity did not begin with forbidden fruit. It began with envy, a connection to our present. Cain still lives in us. Look around at today's world. How many tragedies begin with a small seed of jealousy? A friend envious of another's success gives betrayal. A coworker jealous of another's achievement gives backstabbing, sabotage. A family broken apart by jealousy. A community torn in bloodshed by the struggle for power. It all begins with a small feeling, but when fed, it grows and it kills both love and humanity. In each of us, Cain still whispers. Every time we see someone praised while we are forgotten, every time we see someone happy while we feel miserable, every time we see someone succeed while we fail, in those moments, Cain is alive within us. And the question of God, where is your brother, still echoes to this very day. Where is your brother? Where is your neighbor? Where is your colleague, your friend, your sibling? Are you keeping your responsibility for them, or are you turning away, shrugging them off, as Cain did to Abel? A lesson beyond time. The story of Cain and Abel is not only an ancient tragedy, it is a mirror of humanity itself. It reminds us that every action leaves a trace. Abel's blood still cries from the ground. The sins, betrayals, the pain we inflict on others sooner or later will echo, demanding justice. It reminds us that responsibility cannot be denied. Cain tried to deny it. I am not my brother's keeper. But humans are made to be bound together. We are always responsible for one another. It reminds us that evil begins small. A spark of envy, a seed of jealousy, if not controlled, can grow into disaster. Ask yourself, have you ever been like Cain? Have you ever felt heavy-hearted when others succeeded? Have you ever wished in silence, if only that person were gone, I would feel lighter? That is the moment you are hearing Cain's whisper. And that is the moment you must remember God's words. Sin is crouching at your door, but you must master it. To master it does not mean to deny emotion. To master it means to see it, to face it, and to choose not to let it rule your actions. The final message from Cain to today. The punishment of Cain life in loneliness, wandering stands as the image of what happens when jealousy rules. It severs us from love, from community, from peace. We may go on living, but it is life emptied out. The story of Cain and Abel, therefore, is not just an ancient memory. It is a warning to every generation. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not out there, but inside our own heart. The story of Cain and Abel may seem like just a small passage in the Bible, only a few lines, but its weight has crossed thousands of years, reaching into the hearts of countless generations, because Cain and Abel are not only ancient figures, they are mirrors reflecting ourselves. Cain, the man of labor, of longing for recognition, but consumed by jealousy, bitterness, and finally by crime. Abel, the man of purity, offering the best, living gently, yet becoming the victim of his own brother. Two brothers, two destinies, long ago became symbols of the two sides within the human soul, the nature of humanity. Eden lost, Cain remains. Since being cast out of Eden, humanity has always longed to return to perfection, to the original love. But the story of Cain and Abel shows us the greatest loss was not the garden itself, but the innocence of the heart. Humankind, even from the very beginning, carried darkness. And that darkness had a name: jealousy. Jealousy turned a brother into a murderer. Jealousy turned blood ties into hatred. Jealousy turned family laughter into mourning cries. And jealousy, from then until now, still whispers inside every human heart the echoing question, "Where is your brother?" The question God asked Cain was not only for the past. It is a question for us, here and now. Where is your brother? Where is your neighbor? Where is your companion? Where's the sibling who needs your help? How many times have we chosen silence instead of reaching out? How many times have we told ourselves, "I am not my brother's keeper"? And in those very moments, Cain is whispering in our hearts. The cry from the ground, "Justice never stays silent." Abel's blood was spilled on the ground. And God said, "The voice of your brother's blood cries out from the ground." It is a reminder that every crime has a voice. Every wound we inflict on others does not vanish. It echoes. It seeks to be heard. It demands justice. In our world today, how many cries rise from the earth? The cry of those betrayed in love. The cry of those oppressed at work. The cry of victims of war, of violence, of injustice. Each of these cries reminds us that the story of Cain and Abel has not ended. It is still unfolding every day in countless forms. The punishment, a symbol of human loneliness. God did not kill Cain. Instead, he cursed him to wander forever. That punishment may look lighter on the surface compared to the crime, but in truth, it was the heaviest of all. Because Cain not only lost his brother, he lost his bond with the soil, with the very source of his life. He lost his community. He lost peace. He lived, but he lived in solitude, under the shadow of guilt. And that is also a picture of us. Every time jealousy fills our hearts, we cut ourselves off from love. Every time hatred rises, we exile ourselves within our own souls. Every time we shrug and say, "I am not my brother's keeper," we walk the path of Cain, the present connection. Cain still dwells within us. How many tragedies today begin with envy? A jealous glance in the workplace turns into ruthless competition. A family comparison turns into conflict beyond repair. A spark of jealousy in love turns into blind rage. A bit of rivalry in society turns into endless wars. All begin as small seeds, but when left unchecked, they grow, and they can destroy everything. Cain still remains. Abel still remains. And their story is still being rewritten in every generation. The human lesson: master the Cain within. When jealousy rises, we face two choices. Either we let it lead us, turning us into Cain, or we face it, restrain it, and choose love. God said to Cain, "Sin is crouching at your door. It desires you, but you must master it." That was not only for Cain, that is, for all of us. Sin is always at the door. It waits to come in. But the key is in our hands. And that choice to master or to surrender will decide the path we walk and who we become. A whisper in the heart. Listen closely. In those moments when someone else is praised while you are forgotten. In those moments when someone else is happy while you feel alone. In those moments when someone else succeeds while you fail. There is a small voice whispering, "Why not you?" That is Cain whispering in your heart. And in that very moment, you must remember this story. You must remember Abel. You must remember the blood crying from the ground. You must remember that the first crime did not come from forbidden fruit. It came from envy. The final reflection, a mirror of humanity. Cain and Abel are not only of the past, they are a mirror of who we are within each of us. Cain is still whispering, and sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not out there, but within our own heart. If this story makes you pause and reflect, if it gives you a new perspective on life, remember this. The Bible still holds countless hidden truths, countless lessons waiting to be discovered. Join me on this journey. Subscribe so you will not miss the stories that may help you see the world with new eyes. Because sometimes a single small story is enough to change the way we live.